One of the most promising prospects that Tesla has is its potential for a robo-taxi business. If and when this happens, both Tesla stock and business will grow by 10x magnitude at the least. But what we often hear from many people is that you shouldn't count on this happening anytime soon, as the government regulations will take years and years to come. But what if I told you that it's actually the opposite? That in the US, by default, driverless passenger vehicles and trucks can ride anywhere unless a state has explicitly said that they can't. 24 states, including Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Nevada, specifically allow driverless operations, while another 16 states have no regulation specific to automation. So let's dive deeper. I've got Hans Nelson joining us. He has his own YouTube channel called Hans C. Nelson. You should check them out. He has fantastic interviews. Thank you so much, Hans.
Thanks for having me, Herbert.
So this is a misconception. Even I had this, didn't realize that in fact it's the opposite. In the US, you are allowed to have autonomous driving unless specifically told not to, or more restrictions like you need to be able to have it be, human, supervised or something like that. So let's take a look at this. Alexandra Mertz brought this to our attention. There was an article written by Washington Post, and the paragraph that is, we'll go through some of the article comments because it's quite important what you're hearing from the Department of Transportation and others. But this is the paragraph that just tells the story. By default, driverless passenger vehicles and trucks can ride anywhere in the United States unless a state explicitly says that they can. That means companies can test and operate their vehicles across most of the country. 24 states, which includes Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Nevada, they specifically allow driverless operations. So just that alone might be enough. This is according to data compiled by Aurora. While another 16 states have no regulations specific to autonomous vehicles, the remaining 10, this is California, Massachusetts, and New York, they place limits on autonomous vehicles within their borders. We'll walk through the actual article itself. This article is written primarily talking about autonomous semi-trucks. That was what they was talking about. And just that alone, as you can tell, autonomous trucks is such an important thing that that states want. They know they need safety. They know it's an issue. They can save so much hit to the environment and so forth. What's your thoughts on all this, Hans?
Yeah, like you, I'm a little bit surprised, but in retrospect, I shouldn't be. The way that the law works here in the United States is based on what's called British common law. And the principle in common law is that you are explicitly allowed to do anything that the law does not say that you cannot do. And so it's not surprising that there are not laws on the books that say you can't have an autonomous vehicle, since autonomous vehicles haven't really existed in a legitimate form or fashion up to this point. And so, of course, there's not going to be a whole lot of laws that have been written to address this issue. And so that means that by default, there are no laws prohibiting it, which means they are permitted. And so that's, kind of an interesting turn of events that I think a lot of us just assumed that, it would be difficult to operate businesses or services in these markets. And obviously there will be regulation that is, going to be written with regards to these businesses. But the speed at which they can be adopted, regulation is something that takes time. It's slow. And the speed that this technology is moving forward is probably going to outpace the ability of regulation to hinder its overall growth, at least here in the United States, and potentially in other common law countries as well. And then that is, obviously a great opportunity for Tesla, as long as they're able to pursue their strategy in a way that's very, very safe and doesn't cause injury to lots of people in a way that, is in excess of what would be the case for humans. Then I think there's a lot of room for Tesla to execute and to be able to create something that is able to bring transportation to people that is safer, cheaper, and more convenient all at the same time, which is really the trifecta of what technology does over time, that it gives us better, faster, cheaper, and more accessible. And so, that's what we're hoping for here. Obviously, it's going to create some challenges and disruptions in the economy in the process. But, in the long run, the fewer amount of hours that humans have to spend dedicated to just transporting, whether it's goods, whether it's people, um, actually, that means that there's more time available to people to do more valuable and interesting things. And, this is the path that humanity has been on now for thousands of years, figuring out how to do more with less, and in the process getting more of our time back to do more of the things that we want to do. And yeah, this is going to be a huge catalyst in that arena moving forward.
It's really funny, isn't it? That actually the comment of regulation, state regulation, and government regulation, city regulation is going to take so long because it's the government. They're going to take a long time. It's actually the opposite. It actually works in favor of Tesla, autonomous driving, and road to robotaxi, because as we'll report shortly here, NHTSA themselves is working on regulations, but that will be to help kind of solidify kind of the safety. But by then, the data would be out. There would be a lot of testing already done. So nobody's actually coming in saying you can't test. In fact, many states are opening it up that you should test. You can already test regardless if you get any regulations. Anyways, it's fantastic clarification of what's actually happening out there. So, of course, there's several people on either side of the story, right? So you got the labor unions and you got the safety advocates. What they're doing, of course, is they're pushing for legislations in several states to ban driverless trucks outright. In this case, this article is about autonomous semis. But so far, the effort has been unsuccessful. The California legislature approved a measure last year that would have required human operators in all autonomous trucks, but government Gavin Newsom vetoed it, calling it unnecessary in light of state regulations that already ban autonomous vehicles over 10,000 pounds. So, this is for passenger vehicles. This is slightly different with if you got 10,000 pounds or higher. But, there's obviously people fighting for this, and hey, labor unions, safety advocates. But transportation experts, here's what's interesting. They are actually the opposite. They've been frustrated how slowly the federal government has moved on the issue because it's got a tremendous potential to disrupt a massive part of the American economy. So this is this Steve Viselli is a sociologist, studies the trucking industry, said autonomous trucking could change the geography of our economy in the way that railroads and shipping did. So there's actually benefits, huge benefits, not only in safety, but in just the economy and the environment. So why would you fight against this? And then he says this, right? The federal government has been clear in that unless a state says you can't deploy, you can. But that doesn't mean as a company, so these are people who actually have the transportation companies, the autonomous cars, we don't have the responsibilities. So in fact, interestingly, the autonomous vendors themselves actually do want clarification. They do want some sort of, because they want safety as well. But, you shouldn't ban it. You should just help guide it, but make sure that, it's not just this wild, wild west, which is awesome what you just saw there.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we need to not forget is that there's already a huge body of existing civil law that these companies that are going to be operating any services are subject to. And, they can be sued for any number of reasons. And having some actual regulation that's in place that creates clarity for the business on where the boundaries of how they are able to operate and how they're not able to operate, I think that is something that they will advocate for and, has the possibility of being beneficial. But yeah, people shouldn't forget that just because there's no explicit laws on the books that say you cannot operate an autonomous vehicle or a company that has an autonomous vehicle fleet, that doesn't mean that there's not lots of other regulations that already exist that really can and should be able to deal with many of the downsides, many of the concerns that people are going to have regarding the safety, the efficacy, and potentially even some of the disruptive market dynamics that are going to arise from this technology.
So interestingly, again, shockingly, the Department of Transportation for these states, and this one anyways in Texas, this guy named Mark Williams, he's just very supportive of all this. So he's developed a good relationship with these companies that are testing autonomous, vehicles, in this case, the semis and trucks. The state has been at the forefront of supporting the industry, and it's critical for its economic growth as demand grows for moving freight around the state. So they see that Department of Transportation actually support this and want this to happen. If we're going to meet that challenge, it requires us to be successful in these partnerships and collaborations with trucking, autonomous trucking industry. I wonder if trucking is going to be different than passengers, but certainly, that this is how they see it. And then the government has been slow to grapple with the implications of new technology. The U.S. Transportation Department has largely allowed the companies to test their products on public roads as long as companies comply with the same safety standards that apply to traditional human-driven trucks. That's what you just said earlier, right? It's like, what's the difference? Like, why jump on autonomous vehicles? Just watch and see what happens. If autonomous vehicles cause more accidents, then of course you should, just like you would in any scenario. It doesn't even have to be autonomous. Anything that causes more accidents, you should clamp down and stop it right away. But so far, we're not seeing that happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have lots of precedent for auto manufacturers in general that, if there is a design defect or a flaw in the vehicles that they produce that causes a public safety concern, they have to do recalls, and there's, an entire system in place to do that. And I think a lot of the precedent around lawsuits against these auto manufacturers provides a good basis to treat autonomous vehicles kind of in the same way, that, whether the defect is this caused by a hardware issue in the vehicle itself with a human operator or a software issue in an autonomous vehicle, I think that they can probably end up getting treated the same way. And we can still protect public safety without necessarily having to just invent whole cloth from scratch, a whole new set of laws and regulations around this area.
I mean, so let's just step back a bit, right? And think about this. So you have Tesla, 400,000 beta testers for the last 3 years. And we don't hear like a tsunami of deaths and injuries and thing causing. You hear one or two and you hear these examples, and then you find out later that they were drunk.
Yeah, so far as we know, every single fatality that has occurred in a Tesla that had FSD operating or autopilot operating, previously, was basically also due to driver error, that these are things that are meant to assist the driver, and that there are no proven instances where the car did something that was dangerous in a way that the driver shouldn't have been able to deal with if they were paying attention the way that they were supposed to. And so, that is a good sign in and of itself. We've got lots and lots of miles, billions of miles at this point worth of data supporting the safety of the system, and that's only going to continue to get better. And as full self-driving version 12 continues to just advance rapidly, we'll actually be getting more and more data and have higher quality ability to appeal to a regulator like NHTSA and say, now we're not only do we have incredible safety, but we've got intervention data showing that, almost no, there are almost no interventions that are necessary in order to prevent safety critical events. And so the combination of all of that really allows us to make a credible case before legislators, before the judicial system, to say that this is not only as safe as a human, the existing human drivers, this is more safe and is actually in the best interest of public safety moving forward.
It's wonderful. So what I just said here was supervised driving is actually safe, and in fact safer than non-supervised. So even I'm testing out my beta. I'm much more very, very clear. And I
know
so
100% that if I don't have a Tesla yet, but if I did, I would be a much safer driver with FSD activated than I am
Yeah,
without it.
because you have a camera looking at you, and if you look away, it's going to beep. If you take your hands off the steering wheel, it'll beep. So it's
And it
really
can see
funny
things
that,
that I just can't see without looking
yeah,
specifically. And yeah, there are so many benefits
people
that it
don't
has.
realize that you're being watched as you're doing the beta. So people don't realize that, you are, it's even more of a supervision. The supervision is of you, not just you supervising the driving, you're being supervised too. But and then we have Cruise and
Mhm.
Waymo
Waymo.
already
Yep.
doing robo taxi services in many cities. Like some of them, I think Waymo's 7 cities, and Cruise, obviously they had to shut down, they had to retract. But we found out that Cruise, you come in, there's no driver, you would be taken as a robo taxi, you'd pay as a robo taxi. It's actually happening, but now we found out later that there are humans teleoperation watching it, and if they get stuck or something like that, they're ready to take over. So in many ways, it turned out that those robotaxi services were very much supervised. It's just that the person wasn't sitting there, but they still control the car. But my point again is that because these tests have been happening, and both Cruise, Waymo, and Tesla in the US have been testing it. Of course, we know that in China, many companies are testing it there too. It's like, it's not, no one's coming in and and they don't need to, because it's not a rash of deaths or harm.
Mhm.
Now, what you said was as soon as it gets better, which is what we're seeing now with 12.3.3, that when they eventually switch over to it's actually safer, autonomously safer than a supervised, by that point, there's no ammunition that the government
Yep.
regulations. So this is going to be just, in fact, this is what the story is. The story is that many states not only don't have laws and allow it already, but they actually support it. Here is,
Yep.
what is it that did I already do this? Did I already cover the Mark Williams? Yeah, I already did that. So here's the, um,
One more point
yeah.
to emphasize for the audience, that in all of this, the financial incentives of the companies that are offering these robotaxis are aligned with public safety. That to the extent to which they put public safety at risk, especially additional risk, that makes it much harder for them to make money from their
Mhm.
systems. And so they're going to self regulate, which is what we've already seen, throughout the entire history of autonomous vehicles to this
Mhm.
point, that they have already done a lot of things that are in the interest of maximizing safety, even at the expense of making progress on the system. Because if they don't, then that basically kills their ability to make money long term, which is kind of what you see with the implosion of Cruise. That
Mhm.
their failure to put the proper guardrails in place from a safety standpoint is the reason that it has gone into free fall. And we didn't need an outside regulator to have any new sort of regulations, or like it's just the exact existing infrastructure of laws, and the fact that we have NHTSA, just those two pieces of the puzzle were more than sufficient to prevent abuse of public safety on the part of a company like Cruise. And so any company that does not operate in this way will not
Mhm.
be successful. And so it's not something that we as the public need to be afraid of some evil company out of their greed is going to be
Mhm.
killing millions and millions of people like the tobacco industry or something.
Yeah.
Because the harm that will come from these vehicles is so graphic, it's so explicit, it's so unavoidable. Like there's no hiding from culpability in operating an autonomous vehicle. Everyone's going to know exactly who's at fault. And because everyone knows exactly who's at fault, exactly when it happens, there's very little ability for a company to be successful without maximizing that safety piece.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with everything you just said, except that I want to remind you and everyone else, human drivers, human pilot is pathetic. 440,000 deaths,
Yes.
millions. I remember it's multi-millions of people are injured and maimed,
Hmm.
disabled. And so I still don't understand those people who are fighting against autonomous, going, how dare you? How dare you test this? Don't you know you're putting the public safety at risk? Well, it's a high bar because you have to be killing 440,000
Yeah.
people autonomously before you'll say that, you shouldn't do it. Of course, people go, no, just one death is enough to stop it. Why? Because in a very short few years, you're going to have 440,000 less deaths per year.
Yep.
Millions of people.
Humans just don't think about risk in a logical way. Like risk automatically triggers illogical thinking on the part of humans. So that's the reason why we're not approaching this in a sensible way. And that is going to be something that, you know, Tesla and any other company that's going to make autonomous vehicles has to contend with, is that there will always be those voices. But thankfully, like we've mentioned, NHTSA does seem to be very sensible and very persuadable by concrete data. And so as long as the concrete data says that we are above the human safety, you know, human pilot, then I think that it will be allowed to operate. There will be some public pushback, and but you know, that's really just the price of progress. There's no such thing as an innovation that was not opposed. And so, you know, we shouldn't put our heads in the sand and ignore that piece of history and think that just because this is unarguably a public good, that it won't be opposed.
It will be opposed. But the good news here is talking about NHTSA, National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. They've been working for more than 5 years on a proposal to create basic safety guardrails for autonomous trucks, including requirements for remote assistance to monitor the driver's vehicles, inspections, and vehicle maintenance. So you need to have remote assistance to monitor. The proposed rule, which was submitted to the White House Office of Management and Budget in December, would be Biden administration's most significant action in autonomous trucking. Transportation Department Sean Manning was unable to say when the rule might be finalized, as it still has to go through several more bureaucratic steps. Until then, existing laws prohibit any vehicle, including those equipped with autonomous technology, from posing an unreasonable risk to safety. So, like you just said earlier, it's already there. So if they were not unreasonable risk of safety, if they were posing an unreasonable risk to safety, then they cannot be used, regardless if they have automated technology or not. And like you said, NHTSA is already enforcing using its defect and oversight authorities, just like it did with Cruise already. So that was great. Thank you for that. Now let's talk about LiDAR and the effectiveness of vision only. So this is a guy named Chris Zhang. He's somebody that we have been following. He's pretty good sources for China. He's got good reputation. He said this: I just heard a very explosive news from the supply chain. The next generation platforms of China's 2 leading ADAS brands have turned to pure vision, may retain a LiDAR transition with greatly weakened performance. So basically they've made a decision they're going to go switch to pure vision only. They're dropping LiDAR. We know that this has been happening across the board. This is Ray, again, very credible source. He says, my guess is that the 2 leading ADAS brands are Baidu and Li Auto. The former, Baidu, has been testing its vision only, BEV, and occupancy network and transformer for a while. And the latter experimented with its mostly vision-based system, which started a year ago. The next likely candidate is Xiaopeng, which discussed a while ago, less emphasis on LiDAR. So there's 2 things here to talk about. Hans. First of all, Elon has been talking about that he dropped LiDAR years and years and years ago. And then remember all the fights we kept having?
They never, it not only dropped, like they never had, Tesla has never used LiDAR in any production system. The only LiDAR that has been used by Tesla in the development of FSD were on some test vehicles just to do some validation on their vision systems. But yeah, there's never been a customer delivery of any Tesla with a LiDAR in the history of the company, as far as I'm aware.
So there's that. We'll play a video of Elon talking about his decision to go with vision only versus LiDAR. But the second thing we can talk about is Tesla's decision to go to neural nets and not coded. And none of these companies have done neural nets yet. They probably just started now, but you know, Tesla's got a 2-year head start on that too. And then of course, data matters in that sense. So let's watch this video that you shared with me.
What we're going to explain to you today is that LiDAR is a fool's errand. And anyone relying on LiDAR is doomed. Doomed. Expensive, expensive sensors that are unnecessary. It's like having a whole bunch of expensive appendices. Like one appendix is bad. Well, now we're going to put a whole bunch of them. That's ridiculous. You'll see.
So when did he say this? He goes, "You'll see, doomed," and it's
see.
exactly what happened. There was hundreds of LiDAR companies in China, and they have many, like more than 50 or 60% of them have called bankruptcy. Now you got these companies dropping LiDAR, and it's pretty well doomed at this point. What's your
Yeah,
love
I'm 90% sure that was Autonomy Day. And of course, he's speaking about LiDAR in the context of an autonomous driving vehicle. Elon actually likes LiDAR, and there are lots of use cases that various companies that he owns uses LiDAR for. In fact, he said that SpaceX has used LiDAR extensively. It's just not a good sensor specifically for the task of autonomous driving. And obviously, Elon goes back to first principles on this. Like, there's no argument from physics that says that a sufficiently mature neural net based control system cannot fully sense its surroundings through only vision in a way that allows it to operate safely. And the proof of this is that that is exactly how humans operate and always have. You don't need a LiDAR in order to drive your car. And therefore, if we make a computer-based version of a human control system and give it the same exact senses that humans have, it should be able to drive just fine. And that's been his contention. And it seems like more and more people are converging to this idea. I think the other piece of Ray's tweet, he mentioned that Baidu was pursuing bot, and the last T there was transformers. I'm assuming that means that they are really, trying to get started into basically copying Tesla outright in their approach to use full end-to-end neural nets in their self-driving system as well. And just the progression of autopilot to FSD, through its versions up to, V10, V11, and now V12, I think is a pretty clear demonstration to people who understand the challenges of creating an autonomous vehicle that this is the general path that scales. Obviously, as people in the Tesla community, we're going to tend to agree more with Elon, but it seems like other major players who are trying to solve this problem are also basically converging to the same solution. And it remains to be seen how many players and what it takes. But based on, I had a really incredible conversation with James Dalma the other day. And his contention is that the autonomy unlocks a business model for robotaxis that is only like the only way that you maximize and become a competitive and viable, sustainable business in the robotaxi market is you have to have purpose-built from the ground up robotaxis that are both EVs and fully and generally autonomous. And if you don't have the most efficient sensor and compute suite to do that, then you're just not going to be competitive with someone who has a better, if your competitors can achieve autonomy while using less energy or using less expensive sensors, like the cost of operation of your robotaxi fleet is in the long run going to be uncompetitive, and you're not going to be viable as a business. And everything that we see about Tesla's approach shows us not only are they on a track to achieve a general level of autonomy, but the approach that they're taking is going to give them a defensible advantage from an efficiency standpoint that I just don't see how any other company really competes with them on the efficiency from a compute standpoint, a supply chain standpoint, and a sensor standpoint in their ability. Because you need the best neural nets to maximize the ability of the system to use the cheapest cameras possible. And while someone may be able to use cheap cameras and get a somewhat workable system, their ability to develop the most cutting edge neural nets to then operate on those systems, I'm just very skeptical. I don't see how any player besides Tesla even has a shot at being half as competitive. Like, Tesla's in the position of Apple with regards to autonomous vehicles. And I think it's highly unlikely that anyone else captures, they're really in pole position to capture the majority, 50% plus of the profits that are going to be generated by robotaxis in the next decade.
Yeah, and I was shocked when James Dauma shared his data. He took the data for Uber and Lyft for the city of Chicago, and he said that it only takes 10,000 cars to create an Uber-like service in a dense city like Chicago. 10,000 cars. Tesla can pump out 10,000 cars. Like in a heartbeat.
Well, I mean, even think about, obviously, eventually they're going to want to have purpose-built robotaxis for that. But even, they don't allow people to purchase their leases right now. And I think this is in preparation for exactly the scenario that they can take 10,000, old Tesla trade-ins, or not trade-in, or well, trade-ins as well, but trade-ins and then vehicles coming off of lease and turn them into vehicles on this network. And it's not going to take them any time whatsoever to get 10,000 to put into a city. Like,
it's crazy, isn't it? This is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. Thank you so much, Hans. I appreciate it. Check out his YouTube channel, Hans C. Nelson. You've been growing. You've been getting great guests there. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.